Welcome to Bible Stories, where we dive deep into the mysteries and untold layers of the Bible's most captivating stories. Today, we're exploring a theme that will challenge everything you thought you knew about one of the most well-known narratives in Scripture, the story of Adam and Eve and the mysterious figure of the serpent in Genesis. What if the serpent wasn't just a snake, but a symbol, a divine being, or even a rebellious force challenging humanity to awaken to something far greater? Get ready to embark on a journey through ancient texts, uncovering hidden meanings that reveal the serpent's role in a way you may have never considered before. We'll be looking at the original Hebrew text, exploring the true meaning behind the word Naash, which many of us know simply as serpent. This new perspective invites us to question and rethink the serpent's role, examining it as a figure that goes beyond mere temptation. As we unpack these interpretations, we'll explore how this story speaks to the human struggle for wisdom, freedom, and self-awareness. So, grab your Bible, take a deep breath, and join us as we explore this transformative mystery. And if you're as fascinated by these in-depth biblical explorations as we are, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more enlightening stories and insights every week. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments below, and share it with your church group, family, and friends. Together, let's continue to grow in faith and understanding. Imagine if everything you believed about the serpent in the book of Genesis was turned on its head, revealing a secret in the story of Adam and Eve that could fundamentally shift your understanding. Prepare yourself for a journey into the unknown, because what you're about to uncover is far more intriguing and mysterious than anything you've encountered before. The story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is one of the most iconic tales in the Bible, with the serpent at the heart of this narrative, leading Eve to eat the forbidden fruit and causing humanity's downfall. Traditionally, this serpent is viewed as a deceiver, a creature embodying temptation, perhaps even a literal cobra. But what if our understanding of this character has been mistaken all along? In this video, we'll dive deep into the original Hebrew text of Genesis to reveal a hidden layer that reshapes the serpent's role in ways that could alter your interpretation forever. By the end, you'll see this story in a new light, equipped with insights that bring profound implications for how we understand this ancient text. The book of Genesis, traditionally attributed to Moses, is a foundational text in both Judaism and Christianity, featuring stories that have shaped religious beliefs for thousands of years. Among these, the tale of Adam and Eve is pivotal as it addresses themes of innocence, temptation, and the human condition itself. Understanding the true nature of the characters in this story is essential to grasping its message fully. To uncover the serpent's true identity, we need to go back to the original Hebrew text. In Genesis 3 verse 1, the serpent is introduced with the Hebrew word Naash, typically translated as serpent or snake in most English versions. However, Hebrew is a nuanced language, and Naash holds deeper meanings that go far beyond a simple translation. While Naash can indeed mean serpent, it also has alternative meanings. In certain contexts, it refers to a diviner or one who practices enchantment. This additional layer suggests a very different understanding of the serpent's character. Rather than a mere snake, Naash could imply a being with supernatural insight or powers. Scholars have long debated the true nature of the serpent, suggesting interpretations that view Naash metaphorically as a force of chaos or even a rebellious divine entity. Some propose that the serpent wasn't a literal snake, but rather a symbolic figure, possibly a fallen angel or a manifestation of Satan. One prominent interpretation compares the serpent to figures like Prometheus in Greek mythology, a divine rebel who defies the established order to bring knowledge to humanity. Through this lens, the serpent emerges not simply as a deceiver, but as a complex figure with a dual role as tempter and illuminator. Exploring some possible interpretations of the serpent, we begin to see the story in a new dimension. 1. Divine being ***. Some scholars suggest that the serpent was a divine being, perhaps a lesser god or demigod. This view aligns with the mythology of the ancient Near East, where serpents were symbols of wisdom and immortality. In several ancient myths, serpents are portrayed as wise, powerful, and sometimes benevolent. For instance, in Mesopotamian mythology, the god Ninjusida, associated with vegetation and the underworld, is often depicted with serpentine traits. Similarly, in Egyptian mythology, the cobra represents the goddess Wadjet, symbolizing protection and royal authority. By interpreting the Genesis serpent as a divine being, it gains a new depth, possessing profound wisdom and a unique relationship with the divine. The temptation of Eve then appears not as mere deception, but a more complex interaction involving divine knowledge and human free will. 2. Symbol of chaos **** in many ancient cultures. The serpent represented chaos and disorder, embodying forces that challenge divine order and test humanity's obedience. This interpretation finds support in the serpent's role in leading Adam and Eve to disobey God, introducing chaos into the otherwise harmonious Garden of Eden. For example, in Babylonian mythology, the chaos monster Tiamat, often depicted as a serpent or dragon, embodies primordial chaos that the god Marduk must conquer to establish order. Similarly, Norse mythology portrays the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, as a massive sea serpent threatening the world's stability. Applying this symbolic framework to Genesis, the serpent in Eden can be viewed as a force of chaos, highlighting the struggle between stability and disorder, an enduring theme in creation myths across cultures. 3. Metaphorical figure ***. Another perspective sees the serpent as a metaphorical embodiment of humanity's internal conflict between obedience to God and the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. This view emphasizes the moral and philosophical dimensions of the story, with the serpent symbolizing human curiosity and the desire for self-determination. Eating the forbidden fruit becomes not just an act of defiance, but a profound statement about human nature and the quest for knowledge beyond established boundaries. Each of these interpretations expands the story of Adam and Eve, inviting us to reflect on the role of the serpent and the deeper themes it introduces. Far from being a simple story of temptation, it becomes a complex narrative exploring knowledge, free will, and humanity's place within the divine order. With these insights, the story of Genesis opens up new layers of meaning, challenging us to reconsider the ancient wisdom hidden within its verses. Interpreting the serpent as a symbol of inner conflict invites us to see it not merely as a tempter, but as a representation of the personal struggle within each individual. The choice between staying within set boundaries and venturing into the unknown. This symbolic reading aligns with a rich tradition of philosophy and literature that examines the allure and risks of forbidden knowledge. This view emphasizes the moral and philosophical dimensions of the story, with the serpent symbolizing human curiosity and the desire for self-determination. Eating the forbidden fruit becomes not just an act of defiance, but a profound statement about human nature and the quest for knowledge beyond established boundaries. Each of these interpretations expands the story of Adam and Eve, inviting us to reflect on the role of the serpent and the deeper themes it introduces. Far from being a simple story of temptation, it becomes a complex narrative exploring knowledge, free will, and humanity's place within the divine order. With these insights, the story of Genesis opens up new layers of meaning, challenging us to reconsider the ancient wisdom hidden within its verses. Interpreting the serpent as a symbol of inner conflict invites us to see it not merely as a tempter, but as a representation of the personal struggle within each individual. The choice between staying within set boundaries and venturing into the unknown. This symbolic reading aligns with a rich tradition of philosophy and literature that examines the allure and risks of forbidden knowledge. For instance, in John Milton's Paradise Lost, Satan, taking on the form of a serpent, tempts Eve by appealing to her desire for wisdom and self-sovereignty. Similarly, Greek mythology tells of Prometheus, who defies the gods to bring humanity the gift of fire and knowledge, embodying themes of rebellion and enlightenment. Viewing the serpent as more than just a snake redefines the Genesis narrative. If the serpent symbolizes a divine rebel or chaotic force, the story gains depth and complexity. It transforms into a tale about the divine-human relationship, the search for knowledge, and the struggle between order and chaos. With this new perspective, we can revisit the story of Adam and Eve in Eden with fresh eyes. Rather than casting the serpent solely as a deceiver, it becomes a catalyst for humanity's journey toward wisdom and self-realization. The act of consuming the forbidden fruit marks a turning point in human history, a shift from innocence to knowledge, from blind obedience to conscious choice. This reinterpretation carries significant theological weight. It challenges the traditional notion of the serpent as purely evil and suggests a more nuanced character. It raises questions about the nature of temptation and the role of divine beings in humanity's growth. Could the serpent's temptation have been part of God's plan for humanity's development? Was the pursuit of knowledge a necessary and inevitable step in human evolution? For modern readers and believers, this deeper understanding of the serpent enriches faith and enhances appreciation of biblical texts. It encourages an open-minded approach to the Bible, acknowledging the complexity of its narratives. It also highlights the importance of studying original languages and cultural context to grasp the full meanings embedded in ancient texts. Consider Genesis 3 verse 1, which introduces the serpent. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, "Has God indeed said, 'You shall not eat of every tree of the garden'?" The term cunning, from the Hebrew aram, implies intelligence and shrewdness. If we interpret Naash as a divine or semi-divine being, this intelligence might suggest a profound awareness of divine matters, casting the serpent as a figure of knowledge rather than simple deceit. In Genesis 3 verses 4 to 5, the serpent promises Eve wisdom. Then the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Here, the serpent's promise of divine wisdom mirrors themes of enlightenment found in other cultures. The offer to be like God implies more than disobedience. It suggests the potential for a higher existence, transcending innocence and pure obedience. Then, in Genesis 3 verse 22, after the act of disobedience, God says, "Behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put out his hand and take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever." This verse implies that humanity has gained a divine attribute, the knowledge of good and evil. The serpent's promise wasn't an outright lie, but a partial truth with far-reaching consequences. The expulsion from Eden reflects the tension between humanity's desire for knowledge and divine boundaries. Ultimately, the serpent in Genesis is a layered symbol, its true nature cloaked in mystery. Whether we see it as a divine figure, a force of chaos, or a metaphor for inner struggle, the serpent challenges conventional interpretations and beckons us to delve into the richness of biblical wisdom. I hope this exploration of Naash broadens your understanding of the Adam and Eve story, revealing new layers of meaning that deepen faith and insight. As we continue exploring these ancient narratives, we uncover the profound relevance they still hold for modern life. The traditional interpretation of the serpent in Genesis often presents it as a literal snake, cunningly leading Adam and Eve astray. However, a closer look at the original Hebrew text offers compelling clues that something more profound may be at play. The Hebrew word nachash, commonly translated as serpent, holds multiple meanings. Alongside serpent, it can imply the shining one or the whisperer. Such descriptors suggest an intelligent, possibly supernatural figure rather than an ordinary snake. Some scholars propose that the serpent could represent an angelic being or a divine emissary, a figure with immense knowledge and power, shrouded in mystery and allure. This interpretation shifts our perspective from a simple garden snake to a cosmic, possibly rebellious entity with a more intricate role. Ancient Hebrew manuscripts, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, support alternative depictions of this being. These texts hint at a figure of remarkable wisdom and an almost otherworldly appeal, whose presence in Eden may symbolize an ancient conflict between divine and earthly realms. This raises the possibility that the serpent was a powerful spiritual being whose purpose was to challenge or test humanity's allegiance to God, potentially acting out of jealousy or rebellion. Beyond the figure itself, the story of the serpent in Genesis may reflect humanity's deep yearning for wisdom and autonomy. The serpent didn't merely encourage Eve to eat forbidden fruit. It invited her to partake in the knowledge of good and evil. This pivotal act, more than mere defiance, represents humanity's desire to transcend its limitations and grasp divine insight. The Hebrew notion of the serpent as the shining one connects it to celestial beings, known in ancient Jewish tradition to possess knowledge surpassing human understanding. In this light, the story's central theme may focus on the consequences of crossing spiritual boundaries in pursuit of godlike wisdom. This interpretation also aligns with Jewish mystical literature, which often describes a cosmic struggle among angelic beings, with some falling from grace. In this context, the serpent might not be a creature, but a symbolic entity representing cosmic rebellion, tempting humanity with the promise of godlike awareness. The act of eating the fruit was more than a simple mistake. It was an engagement with a dangerous, otherworldly power. Have you ever wondered why the serpent is such a powerful symbol in the book of Genesis? The account of the serpent in the Garden of Eden is one of the most mysterious and misunderstood stories in the Bible. Most of us know the story of Adam and Eve and the serpent's temptation, but there is so much more hiding beneath the surface. When we examine the Hebrew text of Genesis, new revelations come to light that challenge our traditional understanding and uncover truths that have been obscured over time. These revelations could transform the way we see not only the serpent, but the nature of temptation and the battle between good and evil that continues to this day. First, let's consider the serpent's unique role in the story. In the Hebrew language, the serpent is called Nachash, a word that carries meanings beyond the simple idea of a snake. Nachash can be understood as a diviner or enchanter, indicating that the serpent is more than a mere animal. It is an entity with knowledge, intelligence, and the ability to influence human decisions. This subtle nuance reveals a greater complexity to the story, suggesting that the serpent might symbolize a spiritual being or force, representing more than an animal tempting Eve, but rather a powerful agent of deception. Some scholars argue that the Hebrew text suggests the serpent had the ability to communicate directly and persuasively with Adam and Eve, implying a level of agency and wisdom that hints at something supernatural. Moreover, when we delve into other ancient Hebrew writings and cultural contexts, the serpent is often connected to spiritual beings with forbidden knowledge, echoing themes found in other ancient texts like the Book of Enoch. The serpent may represent a figure of rebellion and pride, a spirit aligned with forces opposing God's will, a notion that has implications for understanding the roots of evil in the world. As we continue our study of Genesis, we find even more clues about the serpent's nature. Some interpretations suggest that the serpent's punishment, to crawl on its belly, was not merely physical, but symbolic of a demotion from a higher, even angelic state. This is not explicitly stated, but is inferred from how the curse in Genesis plays out, shifting the serpent from a being of influence to one associated with the ground. In essence, it points to a fall from grace, mirroring themes seen in later texts about fallen angels and rebellious beings who challenge God. Finally, understanding the serpent's role sheds light on the very nature of temptation itself. The story is not merely a historical account, but a profound illustration of how temptation works, how it manipulates, twists, and deceives. The serpent's words to Eve were skillfully crafted to create doubt, stir curiosity, and entice her toward disobedience. This teaches us that temptation often comes in forms that seem reasonable or harmless, masking the destructive consequences underneath. The deeper meanings revealed in the Hebrew text remind us that the story of the serpent is a timeless lesson. It is not just about a singular act of rebellion, but about the ongoing struggle between light and darkness, truth and deception. These ancient insights offer a new perspective on one of the Bible's most well-known stories, challenging us to think critically about the forces that influence us and to seek wisdom that aligns with God's truth. Uncovering these truths in Genesis is both illuminating and sobering. As we understand more about the serpent's role, we're encouraged to look at our own lives and the subtle ways temptation works. What the Hebrew text reveals is a powerful message. We must remain vigilant and seek discernment, for the battle that began in Eden continues within us. And by understanding the true nature of the serpent, we are empowered to make choices that honor the path of righteousness. When we look deeply into the original Hebrew text, we uncover layers of meaning and hidden details that have profound implications for our understanding of not only the serpent, but also humanity, temptation, and the cosmic struggle between good and evil. The Hebrew word for serpent, nachash, carries meanings far richer than the translation might suggest. Typically understood as a snake, nachash also connotes concepts like whispering, incantation, or even divination. In ancient Hebrew culture, the word can imply that this serpent was more than just an animal. It was a creature with wisdom, perhaps even knowledge beyond what humanity was initially meant to possess. The serpent's role as Nachash hints at a mysterious figure capable of leading others astray, bringing into question whether this was a being that represented dark, hidden knowledge. This connection to forbidden knowledge becomes even more intriguing when we consider the serpent's conversation with Eve. The Hebrew text is particularly telling in the serpent's words. Did God really say? In this subtle question, the serpent plants doubt, introducing a powerful psychological element into the story. The serpent didn't outright deny God's words. Rather, it suggested that perhaps there was something Eve was missing, a hidden truth that God might be keeping from her. This subtle manipulation speaks to the deeper nature of temptation. It does not always come in the form of overt lies, but often as subtle twists, stirring curiosity and self-interest. When the serpent tells Eve, "You will not surely die," it presents a partial truth. Although Adam and Eve did not immediately die physically, their act of disobedience resulted in spiritual separation from God and introduced death into the human experience. The serpent's half-truths mirror the tactics of temptation that persist throughout human history, distorting truth to disguise the consequences and make rebellion seem appealing. This is a pattern that we can see in various stories of spiritual beings rebelling against God, especially in ancient Hebrew texts, such as the Book of Enoch, where celestial beings are tempted to share forbidden knowledge with humanity. In the ancient world, the serpent was often a symbol of power, wisdom, and sometimes divine knowledge, attributes that make the serpent's role even more compelling. Interestingly, some interpretations suggest that the serpent in Genesis may have once held a higher, almost angelic status. This is seen in the symbolism of the serpent's punishment to crawl on its belly, an image that could imply a fall from an elevated, spiritual state to one bound to the earth. This interpretation aligns with other ancient texts that describe fallen beings who challenged divine authority and were cast down as a result. Thus, the serpent story becomes not only one of humanity's fall, but also of a cosmic rebellion against divine order, one that reflects the eternal struggle between light and darkness. Moreover, the serpent's presence in the garden introduces a profound theological question. Why would God allow such a being in paradise? The presence of the serpent could be seen as a test, a choice presented to humanity that would shape the destiny of all future generations. It reflects a foundational theme in the Bible, the concept of free will. God granted Adam and Eve the freedom to choose, the knowledge of good, to either remain in trust and obedience, is not just intellectual autonomy, but an experiential awareness of moral consequence. The serpent represents an understanding that carries the weight of guilt, of choosing one's path in gaining this knowledge. Guidance. Humanity lost that is echoed through human unbroken communion with God. This transformative moment shows that sin is not merely an act of disobedience, but a choice that alters one's very nature, leading to a sense of separation, vulnerability, and spiritual nakedness. The story of Adam and Eve serves as a warning that some knowledge, especially when pursued outside of divine guidance, comes with a heavy cost. A prophecy of redemption, the first promise of hope. Despite the tragedy of the fall, the story of the serpent contains a promise of redemption. In Genesis 3 verse 15, God declares that the offspring of the woman will one day crush the serpent's head, a prophecy often interpreted as the first foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, the seed of the woman who would ultimately defeat sin and death. This verse, known as the Proto-Evangelium, or First Gospel, offers hope even in the midst of humanity's fall. It reminds us that God's plan for salvation was in place from the beginning and that He had already prepared a way for humanity to be reconciled to Him. This promise reveals that the serpent's deception, while devastating, would not have the final word. From the very moment of humanity's failure, God set in motion a plan for restoration. This prophecy underscores the Bible's overarching message that, despite humanity's tendency toward disobedience and rebellion, God's grace and mercy are available to those who seek redemption. The defeat of the serpent symbolizes the ultimate victory of light over darkness, good over evil, and divine truth over deception. A victory that finds its culmination in the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. Temptation's timeless tactics. What the serpent teaches us today. The serpent's actions in Genesis reveal universal truths about the nature of temptation that continue to resonate. In every age, temptation often comes not as an outright challenge to our beliefs, but as a subtle suggestion, a quiet whisper that questions our faith or stirs our pride. The serpent's approach, planting seeds of doubt, appealing to curiosity, and questioning authority, is a tactic that remains as effective today as it was in Eden. Recognizing this pattern empowers us to guard against the subtle influences that seek to lead us away from our path. In our own lives, we face serpents in various forms, be they doubts, desires, or influences that challenge our faith and values. The Genesis account serves as both a caution and a guide, reminding us that while temptation may appear attractive or harmless, it often masks deeper consequences. By studying the serpent's tactics, we are better prepared to recognize and resist the subtle influences that seek to disrupt our relationship with God. Rediscovering the story, a call to vigilance and faith. The serpent in Genesis represents more than just a single act of temptation. It symbolizes the ongoing struggle between trust and doubt, obedience and rebellion, faith and self-reliance. The insights found in the Hebrew text challenge us to see this ancient story with fresh eyes, recognizing its relevance to our daily lives. As we strive to walk in faith and resist the allure of worldly temptations, may we remember the lessons of Eden and hold fast to the wisdom that leads us closer to God's truth. In the end, the story of the serpent is not merely a tale of humanity's fall, but an invitation to vigilance, wisdom, and faith. It calls us to seek divine guidance, to trust in God's wisdom, and to remember that while the battle between good and evil rages on, the victory has already been promised. The path to redemption is open to all who choose to walk in the light, turning away from the whispers of doubt and deception that began in the garden, but continue to echo within us. The serpent's secret is one of warning, wisdom, and, ultimately, hope. A reminder that even in our weakness, the story of the serpent is not merely a tale about the origins of sin. It is a profound narrative about the transformation of the human soul and the beginning of a journey back to divine communion. The story of the serpent in Genesis also holds another layer of symbolic meaning. The serpent's act initiated a divine plan for redemption. God's curse upon the serpent included a prophecy, a promise that one day, the offspring of the woman would crush the serpent's head. Many theologians interpret this as the first messianic prophecy, foreshadowing the ultimate defeat of evil through Jesus Christ. In this light, the serpent's deception becomes a catalyst for God's plan of salvation, marking the beginning of a redemptive arc that stretches across the entire Bible. This ancient story reminds us of the nature of temptation and the importance of vigilance. The serpent's subtle influence shows that temptation does not always appear monstrous or overtly evil. Often, it comes in whispers, in questions that challenge our faith, and in ideas that seem rational or appealing but ultimately lead us away from our true purpose. The Hebrew text illuminates this danger, revealing how easy it is to be led astray when we prioritize our desires over divine truth. Finally, the story of the serpent in Genesis serves as a mirror for us today. The temptations we face may be different in form, but they follow the same patterns: doubt, curiosity, and the desire to define our own path. Just as Adam and Eve faced a choice in Eden, we are each confronted with choices that test our faith, integrity, and purpose. Understanding the story in its original Hebrew context reminds us that, despite the passage of time, the human heart remains vulnerable to the same influences. By learning from the past, we are better equipped to navigate the challenges of the present. The revelations hidden within the Hebrew text challenge us to see the story of the serpent as more than an ancient myth. It is a powerful allegory with timeless truths about human nature, spiritual deception, and the enduring hope of redemption. The serpent in Genesis is not only a symbol of sin, but also a reminder of our need for divine guidance. As we continue to study and reflect on these ancient words, may we be inspired to seek wisdom, discernment, and the courage to choose the path that leads us closer to God's light. The story of the serpent in Genesis has captivated the imagination of theologians, historians, and seekers of truth for millennia. While the image of a cunning snake tempting Eve with forbidden fruit has become iconic, a deeper dive into the original Hebrew text reveals layers of meaning that are often overlooked or misunderstood. Far from being a simple tale of disobedience, this narrative offers a profound exploration of temptation, the nature of free will, and the cosmic battle between good and evil, a story that resonates through every age. The mysterious identity of the serpent, more than meets the eye. The Hebrew term used for the serpent, nachash, is far richer than its translation into snake would suggest. This word can mean not only serpent, but also carries associations with divination, whispering, or enchantment. In ancient contexts, this implies that the serpent was not merely an animal but a being with supernatural insight and persuasive power, possibly even representing a spiritual or fallen being with its own agenda. In this light, the serpent transforms from a simple creature to a powerful archetype of temptation, a figure whose intent is to disrupt harmony between humanity and God. Interestingly, some scholars have suggested that Nachash might refer to a being of divine origin or angelic status, possibly even one who rebelled against divine authority. The idea of the serpent being more than a mere animal is supported by the serpent's apparent intelligence, ability to communicate, and profound understanding of human nature. In this sense, the serpent could be seen as embodying a spiritual presence that goes beyond a mere creature in the garden. It represents a calculated force of opposition, one that has persisted throughout human history. The serpent's strategy, planting seeds of doubt and desire. The serpent's interaction with Eve is particularly illuminating when we examine the language in the Hebrew text. Instead of directly contradicting God, the serpent subtly twists God's words, beginning with a question. Did God really say? In this seemingly innocent question, the serpent introduces a seed of doubt, prompting Eve to reconsider God's command. This tactic of casting doubt is one of the most insidious forms of temptation because it subtly undermines trust and opens the door for confusion. The serpent's strategy is not brute force but subtle manipulation, creating a sense of curiosity and mistrust within Eve. This moment also reveals a timeless truth about the nature of temptation. It often arrives not as an outright lie, but as a half-truth or misrepresentation, appealing to our desires and encouraging us to question what we know to be right. The serpent does not compel Eve to act. It simply suggests that there might be something more, something hidden, something that God is withholding. This curiosity leads to the fateful decision that alters the course of human history. Temptation, as shown in this story, often appeals to our desire for autonomy, knowledge, and independence, values that are not inherently wrong but become destructive when pursued outside of God's guidance. The serpent as a symbol of rebellion, a fallen status? One of the most intriguing aspects of the serpent's role is its punishment. When God pronounces judgment, he declares that the serpent will crawl on its belly and eat dust, a curse that many scholars interpret as a symbolic demotion. This act of crawling on the belly could imply a fall from an elevated, even angelic status. If we consider ancient Jewish literature, such as the Book of Enoch, we find descriptions of fallen beings who once held high status in the heavens but were cast down because of their rebellion. This context hints that the serpent may not have been a lowly creature from the start, but rather a once-honored being who chose opposition over obedience. This fall of the serpent from a potentially exalted status reflects a broader biblical theme of rebellion, where pride leads to downfall. The serpent's choice to deceive humanity and oppose God's will mirrors the story of other fallen figures in the Bible, such as Lucifer, who sought power and independence at the cost of his relationship with God. Thus, the serpent becomes more than just a figure of temptation. It embodies the spirit of rebellion, the desire for self-determination apart from divine authority, a theme that resonates throughout Scripture and human history. The knowledge of good and evil. What did humanity gain and lose? The Hebrew word used to describe the knowledge that Adam and Eve gained is yada, which implies an intimate, experiential knowledge. This was not simply a matter of learning facts. It was a transformative understanding that fundamentally altered their perception of themselves, each other, and their world. After eating the fruit, they became aware of their nakedness, an awareness that symbolizes vulnerability, shame, and the realization of their separation from God's presence. This moment marks the beginning of a journey filled with struggle, toil, and the desire to return to an innocence that was lost in a single decision. Few stories in human history carry as much weight and mystery as the story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. What if this story isn't as straightforward as it seems? What if the ancient Hebrew text holds secrets, embedded symbols, and revelations that could reshape our understanding of not only the serpent, but also of humanity's role in creation and its ongoing battle with darkness? Unpacking these secrets reveals profound insights into the nature of temptation, the consequences of disobedience, and the extraordinary measures taken by God to redeem a fractured world. The enigma of the serpent, unveiling its true identity. The Hebrew language, filled with layers of meaning, presents the serpent in Genesis as a character who is far more than just a cunning animal. In Hebrew, the term used for serpent, nachash, has connections to other terms associated with whispering, enchantment, and divination. This term implies that the serpent in Eden was more than a creature slithering on the ground. Many ancient Jewish texts, including portions of the Talmud and Midrashic literature, suggest the serpent held a near-divine status, possibly a being with wisdom and influence, and one capable of complex communication. Consider the symbolic power of the serpent as a figure that opposes God's authority. It's tempting to see the serpent as merely a talking animal, but the ancient Hebrew suggests something much deeper, a representation of spiritual opposition. The serpent's actions may reflect the ongoing rebellion of spiritual forces, echoing the fate of angelic beings like Lucifer, who sought their own path over the will of God. This connection brings into question the serpent's true origin. Was it simply a creature or a symbolic representation of a spiritual adversary who had fallen from grace? Temptation's beguiling power, subtlety over strength. The serpent's temptation of Eve offers a timeless look at how deceit and rebellion often begin, not with an outright lie, but with a small seed of doubt. Did God really say, is the serpent's opening line? A question that at first seems harmless, but is actually a carefully crafted assault on Eve's trust in God's command. The serpent's tactic introduces doubt and curiosity, prompting Eve to consider that God may be withholding something desirable. The words invite Eve to question her understanding of God's instructions, subtly distorting the truth and stirring an interest in forbidden knowledge. This approach reveals a pattern that continues in humanity's struggles today. Temptation often arrives as a whisper, a question, or a possibility that seems reasonable or appealing. By challenging the boundaries God set, the serpent casts disobedience as a path to self-discovery. When the serpent suggests, "You will not surely die," it isn't an outright lie, but a distortion, insinuating that death may not be as immediate or severe as God implied. In this way, the serpent symbolizes the allure of rebellion cloaked in half-truths, leading Eve, and, through her, all of humanity, down a path that would separate them from divine communion. The forbidden fruit, the true meaning of knowledge of good and evil. When Eve reaches for the fruit, she isn't simply grasping an apple or pomegranate. In the Hebrew text, the knowledge of good and evil represents an experiential awareness of moral choices and consequences, an ability to discern between right and wrong. However, this knowledge came with a high cost. In that moment of disobedience, Adam and Eve's eyes were opened, but what they saw was vulnerability, shame, and a newfound sense of separation from God. The knowledge they gained was more than intellectual. It was a transformation that marked their spirits and their bodies, shifting their understanding of life itself. In the Hebrew tradition, the word yada, used to describe their knowledge, goes beyond simple awareness. It suggests an intimate, deep understanding that shapes one's perception of reality. This knowledge is not the kind that enriches and uplifts, but a burden that brings anxiety, guilt, and a realization of one's own limitations and mortality. Thus, the story of the serpent and the fruit is about the consequences of seeking autonomy from God, illustrating that some knowledge, pursued apart from divine wisdom, can lead to isolation and loss rather than empowerment. The serpent's fall and its symbolic curse. When God condemns the serpent to crawl on its belly and eat dust, it's a judgment that many theologians believe is more than a physical transformation. In ancient Jewish and Christian thought, this curse is seen as a symbolic demotion, indicating a fall from a higher state. If the serpent once represented a celestial being or a creature with spiritual insight, then this punishment signifies a profound loss of status, a descent from influence to humiliation. The serpent's curse reflects the fate of beings who choose rebellion over obedience, a fall from grace that echoes throughout biblical stories of fallen angels and wayward prophets. This fall also symbolizes humanity's struggle with pride and the dangers of placing self-interest above divine will. The serpent's fate serves as a cautionary tale. Those who seek power apart from God often find themselves brought low, humbled by their own ambition. The curse to eat dust reflects a life cut off from divine purpose, a destiny of wandering and futility. In this sense, the serpent's curse foreshadows the trials that humanity will face as a result of choosing autonomy over trust. The prophetic promise, foreshadowing redemption in Eden. Amidst the sorrow of humanity's fall, Genesis offers a glimmer of hope. God's words to the serpent include a prophecy, a promise that one day, the offspring of the woman will crush the serpent's head. This is widely considered the first prophecy of the Messiah, a hint of God's plan to defeat evil through the lineage of humanity. Known as the Proto-Evangelium or First Gospel, this prophecy is a beacon of hope that illuminates the entire biblical narrative. It tells us that even though humanity fell, God had already set in motion a plan to restore creation. This prophecy also reveals the paradox of divine justice and mercy. Even as humanity faces the consequences of disobedience, God promises redemption and victory over evil. The serpent may have initiated the fall, but God promises that humanity, through the Messiah, will have the final victory. This powerful truth gives meaning to the struggle between good and evil, showing that while darkness may seem to prevail for a time, the light of redemption has already been promised. A lesson in vigilance, the serpent's continued influence. The story of the serpent reminds us that temptation remains an ever-present reality, often appearing in subtle forms that invite us to question, doubt, and drift away from truth. The serpent's tactics are timeless, planting seeds of distrust, appealing to curiosity, and challenging authority. This tale serves as a powerful allegory for our daily lives, urging us to recognize and resist the forces that seek to separate us from God. In our modern lives, the serpents we face may be internal, doubts, desires, or temptations to prioritize our will over God's. These challenges are part of the ongoing human experience, reminding us that we are all vulnerable to influences that can lead us astray. By understanding the serpent's tactics, we gain insight into our own vulnerabilities and learn the importance of discernment, faith, and vigilance. Rediscovering Genesis, the serpent as a mirror of humanity's struggle. The serpent story is not just a tale of an ancient garden. It is a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting our struggles with trust, pride, and the desire for control. The serpent's question, "Did God really say?" is an invitation to examine our own relationship with truth and authority. It challenges us to ask ourselves whether we are willing to trust in God's wisdom or seek our own path at any cost. The ancient Hebrew text brings this story to life in a way that resonates deeply, reminding us of the timeless nature of these struggles. The deeper meanings of the serpent in Genesis invite us to look beyond the surface, to uncover the profound spiritual lessons embedded in this ancient story. This tale is not just about the beginning of humanity's journey. It is about our ongoing journey, our need for redemption, and our hope in the promise of victory over darkness. Through the story of the serpent, we are reminded that while the battle between light and dark continues, the promise of restoration remains. As we seek to understand these mysteries, may we also seek to walk in the light, guided by the wisdom that can only come from trusting in the Creator. The story of the serpent in Genesis is one of humanity's oldest mysteries. Known around the world and retold through centuries, this tale represents more than just a narrative of temptation. It holds profound truths about the nature of evil, human vulnerability, and the promise of redemption. But hidden within the Hebrew text are layers of meaning that reveal even more shocking insights into this story. A story that goes beyond a simple act of disobedience and reaches into the very essence of humanity's relationship with the divine. As we peel back these layers, we uncover a timeless battle between good and evil, light and darkness, and a lesson about the subtle yet powerful allure of rebellion. The symbolism of the serpent, a mysterious figure of temptation. In Genesis, the serpent is not just any creature. In Hebrew, the term used for the serpent is nachash, a word that has far-reaching connotations. Unlike the English serpent or snake, nachash carries associations with whispering, enchantment, and divination, suggesting that this being may have been more than a physical creature slithering on the ground. Instead, it hints at a being with insight, one capable of persuasion and seduction. Some ancient texts, including Jewish midrash and the apocryphal writings, even suggest that the serpent might have had a higher, perhaps even angelic, status before the events of the garden. This depiction shifts our understanding of the serpent from a simple animal to a figure symbolizing spiritual opposition. The serpent becomes a character representing rebellion and the desire for autonomy, an archetype of a force that has existed long before humanity and continues to operate in the world today. In this sense, the serpent is less a character in the garden and more a representation of the struggle within every human soul, the struggle between trust and doubt, between submission and the desire for independence. The serpent's approach, the strategy of doubt and division. One of the serpent's most effective weapons is the way it introduces doubt. The question, "Did God really say?" is deceptively simple, yet it is powerful enough to shake Eve's trust in God's command. This is the serpent's subtle tactic, planting a seed of doubt that causes Eve to question whether God is fully transparent with her, perhaps even hinting that God is withholding something desirable. By questioning the boundaries set by God, the serpent appeals to Eve's natural curiosity and perhaps her desire for understanding and self-determination. This approach offers a profound insight into how temptation often operates in human life. Rarely does temptation appear as an outright denial of truth. Rather, it often arrives as a suggestion that questions our beliefs or nudges us to explore something forbidden. The serpent's tactic is a reminder of how temptation often begins. not as a forceful push, but as a subtle invitation to reconsider boundaries, to question authority, and to imagine life beyond divine guidance. The serpent's influence is not overtly aggressive, but quiet, like a whisper, slowly drawing Eve away from what she knows to be true. The tree of knowledge, the desire for wisdom, and the cost of disobedience. When Eve reaches for the fruit, the act is not as simple as a forbidden snack. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents a threshold of understanding, a boundary that humanity was never intended to cross in isolation from God. In Hebrew, the word for knowledge, yada, implies an intimate and experiential knowledge, one that transforms the person who gains it. This knowledge is not about gaining intellectual insight, but about experiencing something that would change the very fabric of one's perception of reality. The knowledge Adam and Eve gained through their disobedience came at an immediate cost. The realization of their nakedness symbolized a new awareness of vulnerability, an awareness of their separation from God's protection. This knowledge, therefore, was not simply enlightening, but shattering. It introduced them to shame, guilt, and the painful awareness of their own mortality. They exchanged innocence and trust for autonomy and self-awareness, but it was a heavy exchange that would shape the course of humanity forever. This ancient story illustrates that some forms of knowledge, especially those pursued apart from divine guidance, come with profound consequences. It shows us that humanity's desire to control and understand, while often noble, can lead to a path of isolation and separation from divine truth when it lacks humility and dependence on God. The curse of the serpent, a symbolic fall from grace ***. After Adam and Eve's disobedience, God pronounces judgment on the serpent, cursing it to crawl on its belly and eat dust. To modern readers, this curse might seem merely physical, reducing the serpent to a lowly creature. However, in the Hebrew tradition, this judgment is seen as more than just a physical punishment. It is a symbolic statement about the serpent's fall from a higher, possibly spiritual, status. This fall mirrors the fate of other beings who rebel against God's authority, such as Lucifer, who was cast down for his pride. The serpent's demotion reflects a theme that runs throughout biblical literature. Pride leads to a fall. The curse to crawl on the ground symbolizes a loss of influence and prestige, reducing the serpent from a creature of insight to one that dwells in the dust, a fate of humiliation. This punishment also reflects humanity's struggle with the desire for self-exaltation. Like the serpent, when we seek power or knowledge on our own terms, we risk becoming slaves to our desires, separated from the divine purpose that brings life and meaning. A glimpse of redemption, the prophecy of victory over the serpent. Amidst the judgments, there is a powerful moment of hope. God declares that the offspring of the woman will crush the serpent's head, symbolizing an ultimate victory over evil. Known as the Proto-Evangelium, or First Gospel, this prophecy hints at a future Redeemer who would undo the effects of the serpent's deception. This promise reveals a fundamental aspect of God's character. While humanity may fall, God's plan for restoration is already at work, even from the beginning. This prophecy foreshadows the coming of the Messiah, a figure who would embody truth, defeat the forces of evil, and restore humanity's relationship with God. The serpent, though powerful in its deception, would not have the final word. The promise that the serpent's head will be crushed symbolizes the inevitable triumph of good over evil, a promise that has carried hope across generations, pointing to a day when the effects of sin and death would be eradicated. Temptation's enduring tactics. Recognizing the serpent's influence today, ***. The serpent's role in Genesis is not just a historical event. It is a reflection of the struggles that every human faces. The same questions the serpent posed to Eve, did God really say? And what are you missing? Still echo in our minds today. Temptation often comes wrapped in curiosity, in the desire for freedom, and in the urge to define our own truth. By examining the serpent's methods, we are given tools to recognize and resist these influences in our lives. Our modern world presents countless forms of temptation, often subtle, inviting us to question our values, our purpose, and our faith. The Genesis account is a reminder that the allure of autonomy, when pursued without divine guidance, can lead to a separation that goes beyond the physical and reaches into the spiritual and emotional aspects of our lives. It teaches us the importance of remaining vigilant, of recognizing the voice of doubt that challenges our faith, and of choosing to trust in the wisdom of a higher power. A timeless lesson, the serpent as a reflection of humanity's journey, ***. The story of the serpent holds up a mirror to humanity's nature. The serpent's questions, its allure, and its influence are all too familiar in our own experiences. It invites us to examine our desires, our doubts, and our decisions, encouraging us to ask ourselves if we are willing to trust in a wisdom greater than our own. The serpent's tale is one of rebellion, but also of consequence, forgiveness, and the enduring hope of redemption. In the end, the story of the serpent in Genesis is not merely an ancient tale of humanity's first failure. It is a call to recognize the continuing struggle between our own will and God's purpose. It reminds us that while the battle between good and evil may seem unending, the promise of victory has already been given. The lessons found in the Hebrew text of Genesis offer profound insights into the nature of humanity's journey, the consequences of our choices, and the unfailing promise of redemption. Through the story of the serpent, we see the depth of God's love, the weight of human free will, and the beauty of a divine promise that offers hope even in the face of failure. This ancient account speaks to the heart of every person's spiritual journey, calling us to vigilance, trust, and ultimately, to redemption in the light of divine truth. The story of the serpent in Genesis is one of the most fascinating, complex, and powerful narratives in the Bible. It marks the beginning of humanity's journey through a world of choice, temptation, and consequences. But beyond the surface lies a tale woven with mysteries that delve into the nature of good and evil, the role of free will, and the depth of divine mercy. The ancient Hebrew text reveals secrets about the serpent that not only deepen our understanding of this story, but also invite us to reflect on the struggles we face today. The Garden of Eden, lush and alive with beauty, was a place where humanity walked in unbroken communion with God. It was a paradise where Adam and Eve lived in harmony, untainted by doubt or shame. And yet, within this paradise, a single figure, the serpent, introduced something that would forever alter humanity's path. But who, or what was this serpent? What does it truly represent, and why was it allowed into Eden in the first place? The true nature of the serpent, an ancient symbol of wisdom and rebellion. In Genesis, the serpent appears as more than just an animal. It is a creature with an agenda, a being that possesses knowledge and cunning. The Hebrew word for serpent, nachash, can be translated as snake, but it also holds other meanings. In ancient Hebrew, nachash is associated with divination, wisdom, and even a certain kind of sorcery. This suggests that the serpent was not merely a creature of nature, but a being with awareness, insight, and a mysterious power of persuasion. In the ancient Near East, the serpent was often seen as a symbol of wisdom, immortality, and sometimes divinity. This dual nature, the serpent as wise and yet dangerous, presents the serpent in Genesis as a complex figure, one that symbolizes both the allure of forbidden knowledge and the consequences of desiring wisdom on our own terms. The serpent's cunning, its smooth way of twisting words, and its influence over Eve reveal it as a representation of a force that tempts humanity to seek independence from God. Some scholars and religious traditions have speculated that the serpent was more than an animal. It may have been a celestial being, perhaps even a fallen angel. This view aligns with other biblical texts, like those in Isaiah and Ezekiel, which speak of angelic beings who fell from grace due to their pride and rebellion. Could the serpent, then, be a symbolic representation of an ancient, ongoing rebellion against God's authority? Such a perspective casts the serpent not merely as a character in Eden, but as a powerful symbol of the age-old struggle between obedience to God and the allure of autonomy. The serpent's first weapon, the power of doubt. The serpent's approach to Eve is both simple and masterful. Rather than attacking God's character outright, the serpent plants a subtle doubt in Eve's mind with the question, "Did God really say?" This question may seem innocent, but it is the opening move in a strategy that has been used to great effect throughout human history. The serpent doesn't just question God's words. It questions God's intentions, suggesting that perhaps God is withholding something from Eve, something that would elevate her. This tactic, introducing doubt, is one of the most powerful forms of temptation. Doubt is often the first step away from faith, as it causes us to question what we once held as certain. By introducing doubt, the serpent encourages Eve to view God not as a protector, but as a gatekeeper withholding something valuable. This subtle twist of perspective is enough to shift Eve's thinking from trust to suspicion, laying the groundwork for disobedience. In our own lives, doubt often arrives in this same form, not as a bold rejection of truth, but as a quiet whisper that makes us question the goodness, love, and purpose of God. The nature of the forbidden knowledge, a double-edged sword. When Eve reaches for the fruit, she is not merely grasping a piece of fruit. She is reaching for a type of knowledge that humanity was never meant to possess outside of God's guidance. The tree of knowledge of good and evil represents a boundary, a line that was set by God to protect Adam and Eve. But why would God place such a tree in the garden at all? The presence of this tree suggests that God endowed humanity with free will, the ability to choose, to obey, or to turn away. It is a gift that defines human existence and allows for love, faith, and growth. Yet with this gift comes the responsibility to choose wisely. The knowledge gained from the tree was profound and transformative. In the Hebrew text, the word for knowledge, yada, refers to an intimate, experiential understanding. Adam and Eve's knowledge was not merely about moral awareness, but was something that would change their view of the world, of themselves, and of each other. When they ate the fruit, they realized their own nakedness, a moment of self-awareness that brought with it shame, vulnerability, and the painful realization of their separation from God. This knowledge was indeed a double-edged sword. While it offered insight, it came at the cost of innocence, peace, and the divine intimacy they once shared with God. Humanity gained the ability to understand good and evil, but this understanding became a burden. It introduced fear, guilt, and mortality into their lives. The story of the forbidden fruit teaches us that not all knowledge brings liberation. Some knowledge carries with it the weight of responsibility and the risk of alienation from the divine. The serpent's curse, a symbol of fallen pride. In response to the serpent's actions, God pronounces a curse, condemning it to crawl on its belly and eat dust. This punishment is more than just a physical transformation. It symbolizes the serpent's fall from an exalted position to one of humiliation and disgrace. In the biblical tradition, pride often leads to a fall, a theme echoed in the story of Lucifer and other beings who rebelled against God. The serpent's curse is a reminder of the dangers of self-exaltation. By choosing to tempt humanity, the serpent represents the arrogance of seeking power over others, of defying divine order for personal gain. The curse to eat dust is a powerful image, symbolizing the futility of a life lived apart from God's purpose. This punishment reflects the emptiness and dissatisfaction that often accompany a life driven by pride and rebellion. Even in the midst of the curse, there is a glimmer of hope. God declares that the offspring of the woman will one day crush the serpent's head, a prophecy that theologians interpret as the first promise of a Redeemer who would ultimately defeat evil. Known as the Proto-Evangelium, or First Gospel, this prophecy is seen as a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, who would come to restore humanity's relationship with God and conquer the powers of darkness. This promise of redemption reveals God's incredible mercy and grace. Despite humanity's failure, God already had a plan for salvation. The prophecy reminds us that while evil may hold sway for a time, it will not prevail. The victory belongs to God, and through him, humanity will find restoration. The promise to crush the serpent's head signifies not only a future defeat of evil, but also the eventual restoration of humanity's communion with God. The timelessness of the serpent's tactics. Temptation in the modern world. The serpent's tactics in Eden are not confined to the ancient world. They are patterns of deception that we encounter in our lives every day. Just as the serpent cast doubt in Eve's mind, we often face situations that make us question God's intentions, His love, or His plan for us. The whispers of doubt, the allure of self-sufficiency, and the temptation to grasp for control are challenges that continue to test humanity. The Genesis account is a powerful reminder that temptation often appears as a whisper, a suggestion, or a seemingly harmless question. By understanding the serpent's approach, we can become more aware of the subtle influences that seek to lead us away from truth. The story of the serpent teaches us that vigilance, faith, and trust in God are essential for overcoming the temptations that lead us away from our divine purpose. Rediscovering Eden, a story of humanity's journey and redemption. The story of the serpent is more than a tale of humanity's fall. It is a narrative that reflects the inner struggles of the human heart. The serpent's question, "Did God really say?" is not merely a question posed to Eve. It is a question posed to every person who faces doubt, temptation, and the desire for autonomy. This ancient story speaks to the core of what it means to be human. The tension between trust and doubt, between obedience and rebellion, between dependence on God and the desire for independence. In the end, the story of the serpent is a story of both warning and hope. It cautions us against the allure of pride and the dangers of seeking knowledge without wisdom. Yet it also reassures us that even when we fall, God's love is constant, His plan for redemption unshakable. The Genesis story reminds us that while humanity's journey is fraught with challenges, the path of return to God is always open. Title asterisk The Secret of the Serpent in Genesis. What the Hebrew text reveals will shock you. Introduction asterisk. Welcome to another in-depth exploration on Bible stories. Today, we delve into a profound and often mysterious topic, the serpent in the book of Genesis. Known widely as the cunning creature that led Adam and Eve astray, this figure has inspired countless interpretations and theories. But what if the story holds deeper secrets than we've been led to believe? What if the serpent's role in the Garden of Eden is far more complex than we imagined? By examining the original Hebrew text, hidden layers of meaning begin to emerge, and they could change the way we see the beginning of humanity's story. Stay tuned as we uncover the ancient mysteries concealed in the language and symbolism of Genesis. What we reveal might shock you. Main body asterisk. In Genesis, the serpent appears as a central figure in humanity's fateful fall from grace. Traditionally, the serpent has been seen as Satan, a cunning adversary tempting Eve to disobey God. Yet, when we look deeper into the Hebrew text, we discover that the word used to describe the serpent, nachash asterisk, carries meanings that reach far beyond the idea of a mere snake. In Hebrew, nachash is associated with divination, enchantment, and wisdom, hinting at a creature with far greater significance and power than a simple animal. This serpent was more than a deceiver. It may have represented a challenge to humanity's understanding of wisdom, power, and choice. What if this serpent symbolized a hidden aspect of knowledge, or even a spiritual trial that Adam and Eve had to face? The Hebrew language suggests that the serpent's actions weren't just about tempting humanity to break a rule, but about revealing humanity's potential to make complex moral choices. The serpent might have embodied a spiritual test, symbolizing the inevitable moment when humankind would choose between obedience and the knowledge of good and evil. Interestingly, other ancient sources, such as apocryphal texts and traditional Jewish commentary, suggest that the serpent could have represented a rebellious divine being, even a figure tasked with testing humanity's resolve. The serpent, therefore, could be seen as part of a divine plan rather than merely an instrument of sin. This interpretation transforms the narrative, suggesting that the serpent was not acting alone, but was part of a larger divine purpose. a challenge set by God to elevate Adam and Eve's awareness. The serpent in Genesis is far more than a snake. It is a symbol layered with complex meanings, hidden within the Hebrew text. As we uncover these nuances, we realize that the story of Genesis may not be as straightforward as it appears. The serpent's role was not merely that of a tempter, but potentially as a symbol of wisdom, choice, and the human struggle for enlightenment. So, join us as we continue to explore these hidden truths in the Bible. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with your church group, family, and friends. Help us spread the word about the incredible insights found in Scripture. In the Genesis account, the serpent's presence in the Garden of Eden is one of the most enigmatic and often debated aspects of the creation story. Traditionally viewed as a straightforward deceiver, the serpent's role becomes far more complex and profound when examined through the lens of the original Hebrew text. The Hebrew word used for serpent is nachash, a term that extends beyond its literal translation to encompass associations with mystery, enchantment, and divination. In ancient Hebrew culture, Nachash was not only the word for a serpent, but also carried connotations of wisdom and foresight. This suggests that the creature in the garden may have been more than a physical snake. It may have symbolized a deeper force of insight and revelation, an agent of knowledge that, while dangerous, was also appealing in its promise of wisdom. The Genesis text shows the serpent questioning God's command, subtly challenging Eve's understanding and encouraging her to think critically and independently. The serpent says, "You will not certainly die, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Genesis 3 verses 4-5. This declaration is powerful, for it suggests that the serpent offered Eve an alternative interpretation of divine instruction, sparking a desire for wisdom and autonomy. This episode is commonly seen as a tale of temptation and sin, yet the serpent's actions could also be interpreted as a profound challenge, a test of human will and discernment. Was it necessary for Adam and Eve to encounter the serpent's provocation in order to evolve? According to some interpretations, God's inclusion of the tree of knowledge and the serpent in the garden was intentional, designed to present Adam and Eve with a choice that would shape their consciousness and the future of humanity. By introducing the serpent as a figure of temptation, the story positions Adam and Eve at the crossroads of innocence and awareness. In many ancient cultures, serpents symbolized not just deception, but duality, both creation and destruction, both healer and tempter. The serpent's dual nature, evident in the Hebrew term nachash, could reflect a universal truth, that the pursuit of wisdom often carries both reward and consequence. By eating the fruit, Adam and Eve gained knowledge. But this knowledge came with the price of mortality, separation from divine presence, and the painful complexity of choice. This was not merely punishment, but perhaps a necessary outcome of stepping into a world where understanding good and evil required bearing the weight of that knowledge. Examining the serpent through this lens also brings into question whether this figure represented a greater cosmic tension, perhaps even a figure meant to embody divine duality or a path to enlightenment. In some Jewish mystical traditions, the serpent in Genesis is seen as a creature with higher consciousness, even an angelic being whose role was to challenge humanity towards spiritual evolution. This interpretation brings a new layer to the Genesis story, suggesting that the serpent could have been an agent sent by God to facilitate human growth, challenging humanity to confront the complexities of freedom, consequence, and moral choice. What if, then, the act of eating the fruit was not solely an act of rebellion, but an essential step in humanity's journey towards spiritual maturity? The serpent's promise that Adam and Eve would be like God, knowing good and evil, reveals an ambition that lies at the heart of human nature. The desire to comprehend the mysteries of existence, to discern truth, and to grow beyond innocence. God's response, banishing them from Eden, may signify the natural transition from innocence to experience, from paradise to the reality of a world that is both beautiful and tragic, rewarding and perilous. This deeper examination of the serpent in Genesis suggests a story of human enlightenment, one where the serpent serves as a catalyst for humanity's first steps into moral consciousness. By offering Eve the fruit, the serpent pushed humanity into a realm of knowledge that was previously restricted, opening their eyes to a complex reality where understanding good and evil is inextricably tied to free will. Adam and Eve, in this perspective, were not merely disobedient, but unwitting participants in a spiritual conflict, caught between their creator and a being with motives far beyond human understanding. Viewing the serpent as a powerful, possibly angelic being reframes the Genesis account of the fall. Adam and Eve's choice becomes less about succumbing to animal instinct and more about facing a complex, intelligent adversary whose allure was rooted in wisdom and the promise of autonomy. Through this lens, the fall of man marks humanity's first encounter with spiritual forces and cosmic conflict, setting the stage for a lifelong struggle between divine guidance and the temptation of forbidden knowledge. If the serpent was indeed an intelligent, supernatural entity, it fundamentally alters our understanding of the consequences of the fall. Rather than a simple disobedience, humanity's choice symbolized a profound confrontation with wisdom, moral responsibility, and autonomy. In reaching for the forbidden fruit, Adam and Eve entered into a complex struggle with divine truth, challenging the limits of human understanding and reshaping humanity's spiritual relationship with God for generations to come. May these stories inspire us to live as beacons of hope and truth in a world longing for redemption. If today's message has touched you and you feel the desire to draw nearer to Jesus, to begin a new chapter in your life, or to renew a commitment that may have waned, consider sharing your thoughts below with the words, "I accept you, Lord Jesus, as my only Lord and Savior." May God's blessings flow powerfully into your life. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the hidden depths of the story of Adam, Eve, and the serpent. We hope today's exploration has opened your eyes to the layers of wisdom embedded within this ancient tale, revealing that the serpent in Genesis may be far more than just a deceiver. Whether viewed as a divine being, a symbol of chaos, or a reflection of our own inner struggles, the serpent challenges us to seek knowledge, question our understanding, and pursue a relationship with God that goes beyond blind obedience. If this message has inspired you, take a moment to reflect on how you can deepen your connection to God's Word and grow in your faith. Here at Bible Stories, we believe in creating a community rooted in curiosity, insight, and spiritual growth. So, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Sharing this video with your church group, family, and friends is a great way to spread the message, encouraging others to engage with the mysteries of Scripture and discover their faith on a whole new level. Thank you for being part of our community, and may God's wisdom and love continue to guide you. Until next time, may you find peace, hope, and divine understanding on your journey.